one little thing that actually Dr. Rod did jump in and allude to before was value. We've got to know where our value is. And there's this amazing woman called Riley Gaines that has now become the ultimate feminist, right? The ultimate woman standing up for women's rights in the face of all negativity. She is a former swimmer, competitive swimmer, a college level swimmer. That she ended up tying a race with Will Thomas, who's now going as Leah Thomas and pretending he's a woman to be able to break all the women records and stuff like that. And Riley Gaines tied with Will Thomas, and in the awards ceremony there was only one trophy, and so the athletic board said, no, we're going to give the trophy to this man who was swimming as a woman. Now she's now on this big mission to now stand up for women in sport, and it's this awkward thing of. It's funny how we can't have this conversation of let's defend women's rights. Not just, this is sports and it's a good metaphor and it's a good platform to say, this is just not right. It just doesn't make sense. Why would you allow a male to race against a female? Like, why, if that's the case, why are we even dividing the genders if that's the case? And so it's really interesting to hear her story. Once again, links are in the description. This was actually a video by the Victory Channel, and they interviewed her on Flashpoint. And Dr. Rod, you actually directed me to this video. I thought it was very, very interesting story to see someone courageously standing up, because she said that it was quite interesting. There was even some people that were totally against. I'm mixing up two interviews, but she says that there's so much pressure in the athletic world to support this and encourage it. Whatever the pressures are, and she's one of the very few, actually, kind of like the only one that's really standing up for this. Dr. Rod, how do we defending women's rights or defending women in sports does seem to be something that is quite an important cause to fight for. How do we have this conversation? How do we stand up for something without the fear of the attack of being called racist, being called sexist, being called transphobic and homophobic and all that sort of stuff? How do we have this awkward conversation with and be able to stand up for rights that are being broken down?
Well, again, I think it's based on conviction. In this case, we've got scientific evidence on the side of those who believe that there are significant biological differences between men and women, and transgender women in particular competing against biological women in the sporting arenas has really brought this to the fore. Yep. It's absolutely impossible to argue against the science that demonstrates easily and regularly, of course, that biological men and women, we're different. And biological men in particular are stronger. And that's one reason why they can swim faster, they can run faster, they can jump higher. If you have a look at any competitive sport, generally speaking, the records that are set by men far exceed those of women because there are physical differences between the two. Yeah. And it's becoming very, very difficult for women to excel in some areas in sport these days because a handful, and it's only a handful, of transgender people are competing, and they're being allowed to compete against biological women. Now, my conviction is that women matter. They matter to God. And their sport matters to God. And therefore, look, I don't have any problem with the various sporting organisations establishing, say, an open round where anybody can compete, and that's where the transgender people should be free to compete. But they shouldn't be competing in women's events, particularly in areas like athletics, swimming and other athletic events where the biological differences give men a significant advantage over women. We see it in team sports as well, where a transgender woman or a transgender person can easily injure a woman simply because of their bulk, their weight, and so on. And Riley Gaines has, because of her experience, and you mentioned that she actually tied with Liam Thomas, Leah, so-called Leah Thomas, William, whatever. Now, he beat her in the 100 metres. My understanding is he beat her in the 100 metres. And so under the rules, of course, he got the medal. But they tied right down to the 100th of a second in the 200. It was a thousandth, was it? In the 200 metres. In other words, they were bang on equal. There's no argument. And the officials decided to give him the first prize. And I mean, that is just, it absolutely defies any common sense, any sense of logic or justice.
Like I think that's the biggest frustrating thing about all this is it's just not logical.
No, it's not. It's not.
And it kind of feels like the devil is really just trying to. Well, we know he's the devil of lies. Like he loves deceit, and he's just removing any truth. Like there is no definition. There's so much to talk about with this, but one thing that I commend Riley for, and please go and check out the video, go and support her and the things that she does, and for standing up for women in sports. I think it's a great thing. As Dr. Rod said earlier, we should be standing up for women. But that's what we should be. Not that we are better, but that's what God has called us, especially as men, but as leaders, we are called to protect all of those people under us, and women are one of those, especially women that are at risk, and women that are competing against men are at risk. But one thing that Riley did say was her driving force throughout all of this, or the thing that gave her the strength, because she shares these stories of being attacked and physically being attacked and fearing for her life, and there's just all this stuff, and she's just a little girl, she's just finished college, right? She just finished college, and she's just a little petite, she's just this little swimmer that's now having all these people, death threats against her, and everything like that. And she says the one thing that has gotten her through is her faith. She says there's no way she'd be able to do it with her faith. And I think that for me is, Dr. Rod, how do we maintain our faith when? I mean, you mentor me through my challenges, and I've been going through some personal challenges lately, and I've even started questioning some things. But how, obviously, my faith is strong, my faith in God is strong, but when some of these things start happening, you start going, well, what does God actually mean? Where is God in this? You start to have and so our faith waves, how do we, in the face of all this stuff that is just completely illogical, that is completely just doesn't make sense, how do we make sense of our faith in this?
Well, look, it can often be very difficult. The first thing I would say is it's okay to have questions. It's okay to have doubts.
It's really good.
And all of us do. Look, I've been through periods where I've had questions, where I've had doubts. I've been in a work situation where I thought I was right in the centre of God's will. And I kept saying, well, look, God, if I'm doing your will, how come it's so hard?
Yeah.
You know, how come there's so much opposition? How come it seems to be nearly impossible to push through? And so we've got to accept that we don't know everything. And it's okay to have questions, and it's okay to grumble even if God doesn't give us the answers that we're looking for. So that's the first thing that we need to keep in mind. The second, and this is demonstrated strongly through Riley Gaines's own testimony, she has a lot of support from family.
Yes.
And through all this, she was supported by, I think if I get this right, her manager, her coach. I mean, she referred to them on many occasions during her journey. They supported her. And listen, that's one of the things that keeps our faith strong. You know, God never intended us to do this faith journey on our own. We do it in community. We do it with family. We do it with trusted counsellors around us, people who allow us to ask questions, allow us to unload it. And, of course, you and I know how this process works because we've done it. You know, we've done it. And, look, the Christian walk is not all that easy. I often say to people, I think it takes more courage to be a Christian than just about anything else.
Yeah.
Because we are held to a higher standard than everybody else. These days, of course, saying you're a Christian attracts criticism, even perhaps persecution, and to be a conservative, a Christian conservative, is even worse than being a conservative these days.
Yeah.
So it can be pretty tough.
Yeah.
And look, you know, our personal experience doesn't always line up with the victorious life that we'd like to believe that we all can have. I think what we have to understand is this: our victory is eternal.
Yeah.
So it's not something which necessarily happens today. Our victory is eternal. It's not something which necessarily happens today.
Keeping the eye on the prize, on the long term.
That's right.
On the long term goal. And I think that like going back to you actually, mentoring me through my own personal challenges recently, is I started not questioning my faith, but questioning how I execute my faith. Because I'm like, I'm the sort of person that steps out in faith all the time, like take big leaps. I moved to a different country of what I believe God called me to do. Married someone from the other side of the world. I take big steps. If I just believe God's called me to do something, I move. And so I was kind of questioning of like, maybe I'm hearing wrong, or maybe and I think the one thing that really actually solidified it for me, the one thing that really helped me, that you mentored me through recently, it was something you didn't even really mean it, I don't think, but you didn't mean to say this, but you meant to give me the advice. What you said allowed me to understand the purpose in the situation, right? Like I thought that I saw the purpose, and the purpose wasn't actually revealing itself over time. And so I thought, well, that's what I thought the purpose was, but that's not what's happened. So maybe I must have heard from God wrong. But you actually, with something you shared with me, I'm like, now I actually see what the purpose was, and it aligns with my purpose and the purpose of the situation. Like I get it now. And that enabled me to kind of rise up and continue to keep fighting and keep pushing through the tough time, because now I understand purpose. Now I understand, I see the purpose in why that thing happened. Now, it's not, maybe it's not the best situation, but it's okay. It's what I can work with. And knowing like Riley actually talks about that she felt like she was called to be a dentist and do all this sort of stuff. But you can tell it in her voice and the way she's talking. She knows her purpose in this. She knows her purpose. And, maybe, obviously God didn't do this to her, but she's now found a way of how God has delivered purpose has created a purpose for her within this. And I think that
keep going.
Yeah. No, keep going.
Just very briefly, if I can interrupt, one of the things that really strikes me about Riley Gaines is she's not out to benefit herself in all of this. She intends to do dentistry, right?
Yes.
She's going to go to school and study dentistry, but right now she's doing something for others.
Yeah.
And you see, it's too late to benefit her because essentially her college swimming career is 100%. Behind her, right? That's the way things work at the college level in sports for many, many people. But what she's now doing is she's risking a lot in order to help many, many others. Yeah. And I tell you what, that can be a wonderful motivator for you as well, that when you know that what you are doing is likely to make the path easier for those who follow, you can withstand a lot of pushback, a lot of opposition, when you know that what you are doing is going to make it easier for those who come after you.
Yeah, 100%. It's so when we as leaders are standing up against and fighting against something that it doesn't seem to be right, or it seems to be so illogical, but we need to stand up for those things. We need to stand on our faith, to have our faith in God, but also understand the purpose in the situation so that we can actually pursue it out. And as Dr. Rod said, make sure that purpose is focused on the benefit for other people, not just for ourselves. There were some other stories of Matt Walsh actually interviewed one of Will Thomas's former swimming teammates, I suppose you could call them, and so go and check out those links below and check out those stories. That was actually really interesting. The one bit that I kind of grabbed out of that was the pressure that the rest of the team felt to support what was happening. And it was interesting how they would be crying, that they share these stories of people crying, going to the athletic council's office, and then coming out happy and saying that this is the greatest thing on planet Earth. I wonder what happened in those meetings. And that's the challenge that we are faced with as leaders, that in these really awkward times of things we shouldn't be talking about, we start talking about things and that we are going to stand up for, and there's going to be people that are going to try to convince us that we shouldn't talk about it. Maybe there's better money in not talking about it. Maybe there's better opportunities in not talking about it. Maybe there's better followers, and maybe there's stardom or fame or whatever. Maybe we're going to look better by backing down. But remember, stay true to your faith, what God's called you to your purpose, and see the purpose in the situation so you can stand up and fight for it with strength. Hey, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you like that, hit the like button and put a comment below. Hey, if you want to watch more videos like this, check out our channel, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe.